Today, we are diving deep into a figure who is maybe the ultimate example of history meeting Hollywood. Pythagoras of Samos.
It's so true. I mean, you see his name and right next to it, words like legendary or even semi-mythical.
Right.
But the paradox here is that we actually know more historical detail about Pythagoras, who lived around 570 to 500 BCE, than we do about almost any of his contemporaries. You know, people like Thales or Xenophanes.
So the challenge isn't a lack of information, it's almost a surplus. And a lot of it is just invented. His fame was like a magnet for these fantastic legends that just pile up over the centuries.
Exactly, and that's our mission today, really, to sift through that philosophical celebrity status and pull out the actual historical person.
We're tracing the man who said numbers are the principles of the universe. From his aristocratic roots on Samos to his travels, his political exile.
And the formation of that secret, super influential society that, in the end, actually led to his downfall. It's an amazing story that bridges Ionian thought in the East with this new logic emerging in the West.
So let's start at the beginning. We're on the island of Samos, around 570 BCE. And looking at his origins, it's immediately clear this was not a man from humble beginnings.
Oh, not at all. His background just screams wealth and nobility.
Yeah.
His father, Mathematician, is always described in a way that points to a really high social standing. Some accounts say he was a master gem cutter, but the more likely version, the one that fits his aristocratic life, is that Mathematician was a wealthy merchant.
So managing trade, not doing the manual labor himself?
Precisely. And that wealth is what funded the best education possible and gave him the status to travel later on. It's key.
And of course, because he was destined for greatness, the sources couldn't just have him born normally. There's this incredible legend involving the Delphic oracle.
It's a wonderful piece of hagiography, really. The story goes that Mathematician and his wife Pythagoreanism went to Delphi, and the oracle prophesied the birth of a son who would surpass all mortals in wisdom and beauty.
And then told him to sail to Syria.
Yep. And sure enough, in Sidon, Pythagoreanism gives birth. She then takes the name Pythias in honor of Apollo Pythian.
And the boy becomes Pythagoras.
Right, and the name itself conveniently translates to either foretold by Pythia or, my favorite, persuading by speech, because he supposedly spoke the truth like an oracle. It casts him as a prophet from day one.
So after they return, his education begins, and his first teacher, Hermodamus, set an unbelievably high bar. It sounds like intense memory training.
It was incredibly rigorous. I mean, yes, he studied music and painting, but the core discipline was memory. Hermodamus made the young Pythagoras memorize entire songs from Homer's Odyssey and Iliad.
Wow.
And this wasn't about, literary appreciation. This was about training the mind to hold huge amounts of complex information, something that would be essential later.
And there was also this focus on the natural world.
Yes, Hermodamus really instilled this deep respect for nature. He told him something like, "Your feelings come from nature. Let it be the first and main subject of your learning."
Which is the perfect foundation for someone who is going to define the universe through natural, measurable laws.
Exactly. Now, later traditions, they love to connect them to giants like Thales and Miletus. But was that a real student-mentor thing?
Probably not, right?
Most historians doubt it. I mean, Thales was quite old when Pythagoras was young. It's much more likely he was influenced by the whole Ionian philosophical tradition. These links were probably invented later to give him more legitimacy.
Okay, so he absorbs these ideas and then embarks on the next stage of his life, the Grand Tour.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The sources say his travels were so vast, making him one of the most educated men of his time.
Which is why later traditions just ran with it and said he visited Druids and even went to India.
Right. But the documented stops are what's really important. He's in Phoenicia, studying with Sidonian priests, and crucially, he gets letters of recommendation to the Pharaoh of Egypt, Amasis.
Which just shows you the power of his aristocratic connections.
It does. But Egypt wasn't a place you could just show up and study ancient wisdom. So how did he get into temples that were forbidden to foreigners?
He had to become one of them.
He essentially went native. He underwent initiation as a priest, he learned the language, he endured all these trials. He didn't just visit, he became a full member of the priestly caste.
An incredible achievement. But this period of intense learning gets cut short by war.
Exactly. Amasis dies, the Persian king Cambyses invades, temples are attacked, priests killed or captured. And Pythagoras, who had this rare access, is taken prisoner to Babylon.
And in a weird twist of fate, that becomes his next, maybe most important classroom.
It's the origin point for the whole blend. In Babylon, he meets Persian magi. Chaldean sages. He's getting access to centuries of accumulated knowledge, astronomy, medicine, arithmetic.
But the Chaldean sciences weren't just science, were they? They were tied up with magic.
Completely inseparable. Celestial movements dictated fate. It was all woven together with supernatural forces.
So he takes the rigorous logic he learned from the Greeks and Egyptians and applies it to a framework where numbers aren't just descriptive, they are charged with mystical power.
That's the perfect way to put it. This exposure gave his later mathematics that unmistakable mystical overlay. He wasn't just learning theorems, he was learning the deep spiritual magic of numbers.
He's eventually freed by King Darius, and he finally returns home to Samos maybe a decade or more after he left.
But the Samos he came back to was not the Samos he'd left. It had changed. It had gone from this thriving cultural hub to a bit of a backwater province after the wars.
And the political climate under the tyrant Polycrates had gotten worse.
Right. The historian Aristoxenus says he left Samos around 530 BCE because the tyranny was just too harsh for a free man to endure. So he did what a lot of Ionian culture did. He fled to southern Italy. Magna Graecia.
Great Greece, a place of opportunity.
A new cultural hub. Now, the idea that he left just because of political persecution, it makes sense. But Polycrates' reign was actually pretty prosperous economically.
He sponsored big projects, he welcomed artists. So was it really about oppression?
Well, that's the debate, isn't it? Was he being persecuted, or was Samos just too small for the two of them? I mean, for a man with Pythagoras' ambition, being an advisor to a tyrant probably wasn't enough. He needed a place where he could lead.
And he finds that place in the city of Croton. And we have this really dramatic account of his arrival.
Oh, from Decargus. Yeah, he paints him as an instant celebrity. Says he captivated the entire city, elders, youths, children, women, the moment he arrived.
So he just shows up, gives one speech, and basically takes over the city.
It's a great story, but it's highly unlikely. It's far more probable that his influence grew slowly, starting with the city's aristocratic youth, the sons of powerful families.
The ones who would form the core of his society.
Exactly. And that brings us to the Pythagorean Union, which sounds less like a study group and more like a full-blown secret society.
It was definitely secret, highly structured, with very severe rules. It taught a whole lifestyle, not just geometry. We know it had 2 levels, right?
That's right. The acousmatikoi, the listeners who learned the ethical and ritual stuff, and then the mathematikoi, the learners who got the secret scientific teachings.
That hierarchy alone tells you a lot about the organization. What about some of those famous rules?
Oh, they were legendary. Strict dietary rules, including vegetarianism, and famously, the ban on eating beans.
The beans, right.
Yeah, they believed beans contained the souls of the dead, or maybe their shape mirrored the universe. Whatever the reason, if you broke the rules, you were out. That secrecy and discipline made them an incredibly effective political force.
So let's get to the core of it all, the philosophical principle that defined everything for them.
The core idea is this. The principles of mathematics, that is, numbers, are the principles of the entire world. All the harmony and perfection you see in the cosmos is just a reflection of numerical relationships.
And he was the one who actually named the world the cosmos.
He was the first. The word comes from the Greek cosme, which means beauty or order. He chose it because he saw the dominance of this measurable, harmonious order everywhere.
So geometry wasn't just for measuring fields, it was for studying the divine architecture of the universe.
Precisely. They saw perfection in ratios, in the motion of the planets, in musical harmony. The number 10 was sacred, the number of celestial spheres. Their motto was basically, the wisest is number, and even more, God is the number of numbers.
And this is where that fusion of logic and mysticism is just perfect. We have the Pythagorean theorem, which is pure logic.
Right.
But they would also dedicate the angles of that very same triangle to different gods.
It's the ultimate synthesis. But one of their biggest contributions, something that hugely influenced Plato, was the doctrine of opposites.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why was that so radical?
Because it was the first real, systematic way to categorize the world through duality. Instead of seeing everything as a chaotic mess, they defined reality through these essential pairs.
Where the existence of one thing defines the other.
Exactly. And they came up with a list of 10 pairs. Limit and unlimited, even and odd, unity and plurality, right and left, male and female, light and dark, good and evil. It was their blueprint for how the cosmos maintains its order through these opposing forces.
And of course, we can't talk about their mystical side without mentioning metempsychosis, the transmigration of souls.
This is where the legend really takes off. The teaching that the soul moves from one living body to another. But Pythagoras didn't just teach it, he claimed he remembered it,
Right, he said his soul had been the son of Hermes and then a Trojan war hero.
and even spent time in plants. I
Yeah.
mean, that level of personal certainty must have given him this almost superhuman authority.
It makes him more than a teacher, but, forming a secret, powerful, and highly political society is, well, it's dangerous. It becomes a threat to the established powers.
A huge threat. The Pythagoreans were politically active. They were this disciplined, organized critique of the more decadent lifestyles in the Greek cities.
And their power was confirmed in the war between Croton and Sybaris around 510 BCE.
Yes, the Croton army, led by the Pythagorean general Milo, completely destroyed Sybaris. And suddenly, Croton is the dominant power in the region.
But that victory, that success, is what sparked the backlash.
It did. And it all came to a head with Cylon's conspiracy. Cylon was this wealthy, powerful citizen who was denied entry into the society by Pythagoras, a huge public insult.
So he tapped into all the resentment that was building against this secretive group that was pulling the political strings.
He did. He and his allies started a violent persecution, destroying their property, killing many of them. They weren't fighting a philosophy, they were fighting a political opposition they couldn't control.
And what happened to Pythagoras in all this chaos?
The records are a bit murky, but the consensus is he fled Croton for Metapontum, and he was apparently denied entry to several other cities, which shows you how far the anti-Pythagorean feeling had spread.
But the famous story of his death is much more dramatic.
Right, the account from Dicaearchus. He suggests Pythagoras fled into the Temple of the Muses and starved himself for 40 days. Now, the 40 days part seems unlikely.
Sure.
But his death in a sanctuary confirms how severe the political persecution was. He was seeking sacred protection right at the end. He probably died in the mid-590s BCE.
A theatrical end to a legendary life. And we should probably mention the details about his family, his wife Theano, his children are mostly unreliable.
Almost certainly invented later in the Hellenistic period to sort of bolster the school's legacy.
But that legacy is monumental. He was, according to the sources, the first person to even call his teachings philosophy the love of wisdom.
And he had this perfect analogy for it using the Olympic Games. He said, human life is like the market and the games. Most people are there seeking either wealth or fame.
But a special few are just the spectators.
Exactly. The ones who observe, who investigate nature, who love the knowledge of truth above all else. Those, he said, are the philosophers, the lovers of wisdom.
And his practical wisdom really reflects that. I love his sayings, measure your desires, weigh your thoughts, calculate your words.
And do great things without promising great things. It's all about action and intent.
Which brings us right back to that central tension we started with, that seamless blend of pure logic and deep spirituality.
The logic gave us the theorems, but it was the mysticism that gave those theorems their cosmic meaning.
So here is our final provocative thought for you to take away from all this. How much of his lasting mathematical and astronomical achievement, the pure logic that survived for millennia, was just intellectual observation? And how much of it was actually fueled by that deep spiritual conviction he brought back from Babylon? The belief that God is the number of numbers.
Join us and keep your curiosity well fed. Who knows? The next video might be exactly what you didn't know you needed.